Let's take a look at this. U.S. spends $35 million to send deportees to third-party nations. The Trump administration has spent more than $35 million to deport roughly 300 migrants to countries they had no connection to. This seems like a good use of money. 35 million of your dollars to send 300 migrants to countries that they are not from. Not only that, but doling out millions of dollars in lump sum transfers to foreign governments without a system to track how that money was used. My oh my. The report outlines the cost of President Donald Trump's controversial policy of sending non-citizens to countries other than their own. The White House, it gets more ridiculous. Hang with me. The White House has argued that this method is necessary to remove undocumented criminals whose home nations won't take them. A U.S. official told Senate committee staff in private interview that the program was intended as an intimidation strategy and a costly deterrent aimed at pressuring migrants to drop asylum claims, according to the report. The person said destinations such as Palau, a Pacific island nation, or Eswatini, a kingdom in southern Africa, were selected in part to signal that migrants could be sent to remote locations from far away from home. So basically, this is being used as an intimidation tactic for other immigrants, saying, if you don't cooperate, we're going to take you and ship you off to some country that you have no connections to. They're spending $35 million to intimidate illegal immigrants. Make that one make sense. The bulk of the money went to 5 countries: Equatorial Guinea, Rwanda, El Salvador, Palau, and Eswatini, which collectively received $32 million. The funds were transferred directly to foreign governments rather than through third-party implementing partners, and the State Department is not using outside auditors to track how the money is spent or exactly who's receiving that money. So this is where it starts getting even more ridiculous. I kid you not. A Mexican national, for instance, was flown more than 8,000 miles to South Sudan at an estimated cost of $91,000 per person, including housing at a United States military base in Djibouti along the way. He was then sent back to Mexico, his original place, weeks later. President Claudia Sheinbaum said her government was not informed of the deportation. So they spent $91,000 to take a Mexican, send him to South Sudan, and then immediately pick him back up and ship him back to Mexico. Rather than just sending him back to Mexico like he was where he's from, which costs $5. Here's some gas money and a gas station burrito. There you go. Gets even more ridiculous. A Jamaican national was sent to Eswatini at an estimated cost of more than $181,000, despite having deportation orders to Jamaica. Weeks later, the U.S. again paid to fly him home. Jamaican officials said that they had not refused his return. So, the United States government took your money, $181,000, to take this dude and ship him to Eswatini, and then a couple weeks later pick him back up and send him back to his original country. Separately, the Trump administration is moving ahead with $38.3 billion plan to remake the U.S. immigration detention system and a sweeping expansion that officials say will streamline operations and speed deportations. The plan, known as Detention Reengineering Initiative, calls for acquiring and renovating 8 large-scale detention centers, adding 16 processing centers, and taking control of 10 existing turnkey facilities where Immigration and Customs Enforcement already operates. This is how ridiculously stupid this whole thing is. Meanwhile, we got people seal clapping this, saying, this is what I voted for. And I'm sitting there going, this is the dumbest thing that I've ever seen in my life. Meanwhile, they're continuing to build up a massive confinement detention center system across the entire United States. Again, we're told that their goal is to go collect the immigrants and ship them out. But yet they're going to spend upwards of they've already spent $55 billion, and it's still climbing, of money to build a permanent network of huge detention centers that are all interconnected with the system built next to railroads and bus systems. And they're saying that that is going to be used in order to take care of the immigration problem. Why do you need that much money to build a permanent network for immigrants? That once you take care of the problem, it should all be done. You wouldn't need all of that. No, they're building permanent infrastructure because they plan on making this a permanent prison system, prison country for us. Meanwhile, they're spending $180,000 to take a dude, send him to Eswatini, and then picking him back up and sending him to Jamaica. Or taking a Mexican dude and shipping him off to South Sudan for $81,000, and then picking him back up and taking him right back to Mexico. Again, because the church network that is quote-unquote prophecy watchers is continuing to mockingbird their way with the same distractions of Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and her-da-dur-da-dur-da-dur. They're not covering this stuff. If Biden was the one doing this, they'd be covering it every single day. But because it's not Biden, and because it's not popping up on the same 5 news websites that they use for everything, they're ignoring all of it and just mockingbirding themselves the same stuff over and over and over again. Meanwhile, this is what's really going on, and so the watchmen aren't being watchmen. The watchmen are just sitting there while the enemy's dogs have already ran through the gates and are devouring people right in front of them, but they're sitting there laughing and steel clapping, going, ah, da, 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 da. Wonder what ridiculous thing Tucker Carlson said today. Sorry, guys, I'm just fed up with it. It's just, to see it day in and day out, it's ridiculous. Now, on top of that, we got this. Despite increased profits, private prison companies want to cage even more people. I wonder who the more people are, everybody. Do you know who the more people are? I know who the more people are. Yeah. Investors on CoreCivic and GEO Group's quarterly earning calls expressed frustration that ICE's record immigration detention numbers aren't high enough. This is CoreCivic's revenue from contracts with Immigration and Customs Enforcement skyrocketed in 2025, but some participants on today's quarterly earning calls expressed concern that ICE has not detained as many immigrants as investors hoped. One of the big questions has been the pace of detention by ICE, that it's been below what the investors thought it was going to be. One caller said, I think people thought we'd be at that 100,000 level. We're currently at a little over 70,000. Remember, each person that gets thrown into one of these private prisons, those private prisons and the investors make money. So they want as many people sitting in those things as possible. They don't care if they're illegal immigrants. They don't care if they're U.S. citizens. Either way, they're making money. ICE's detained population is at the highest level since the agency's creation in 2003. The majority are incarcerated in for-profit prisons, which has meant millions of dollars in revenue for the private prison industry. Leading for-profit prison companies, including CoreCivic and the GEO Group, who donated about $500,000 to Republican members of Congress currently in office, and $57,000 to Democratic Congress members from 2021 to 2025. Oh. During the last 3 months of 2025, CoreCivic's revenue from ICE more than doubled from the previous year, from $244.7 million compared to $120.3 million. They're making bank. The company's profits spiked to $116.5 million in 2025, an almost 70% increase from the previous year. CoreCivic expects 2026 to be even more lucrative. The company projects its net revenue to increase between $147.5 million and $157.5 million. And they want more people in there because they make a whole bunch of money. How about the GEO Group, who held its earning calls just a few hours after CoreCivic's? Like CoreCivic, its net income and total revenue rose significantly from 2024 to 2025, although the company still carries approximately $1.65 billion in total debt. The company's net income for the fourth quarter doubled from $15.5 million to $31.8 million over the previous year. GEO's group total revenue for 2025 was $2.63 billion. Oh my. Now, these two companies, CoreCivic and GEO Group, let's just take a quick peek, shall we? Private prison companies, CoreCivic and GEO Group, each donated $500,000 to Trump, potentially positioning themselves to benefit from Trump's planned immigration policy. So each group donated $500,000 directly to Trump. And then how did Trump respond? Those are the two companies that got the detention center contracts. About this, the private prison behemoth GEO Group became the first corporation whose PAC maxed out to former President Donald Trump's campaign. That same month, the company used a subsidiary to give an additional $500,000 to a pro-Trump super PAC. The $5,000 contribution that the GEO Group's PAC gave to the Trump campaign was part of a larger $15,000 contribution it gave to the Trump Save America Joint Fundraising Committee, a PAC that raises money for Trump's campaign and his leadership PAC. Save America, which has spent tens of millions of dollars on Trump's legal bills. On the same day, the JFC also reported receiving two contributions of $11.6 thousand each from two GEO Group executives, founder and board chairman George Zoley and CEO Brian Evans. The $500,000 contribution that the GEO Group gave to Make America Great Again, a pro-Trump super PAC, came from a subsidiary called GEO Acquisition 2, Inc. So these two groups made sure, like all of the other ones that continue to get contracts and pardons and deals, as long as you give to Trump, he'll return the favor. So these two groups gave a boatload of money to Trump. And how did Trump return the favor? Gave him the contracts for ICE detention centers. Corruption, lawlessness at its finest. Corruption, lawlessness at its finest. Then we have this. ICE is expanding across the U.S. at breakneck speed. ICE plans to lease offices throughout the U.S. as part of a secret months-long expansion campaign, and it just keeps on going. It says documents show that more than 150 leases and office expansions have or would place new facilities in nearly every state, many of them in or just outside the country's largest metropolitan areas. In many cases, these facilities, which are used by street-level agents and ICE attorneys, are located near elementary schools, medical offices, places of worship, and other sensitive locations. There's no decrease in what they're building. It's actually increasing right now. In El Paso, Texas, for example, the agency is moving into a large campus of buildings right off the Interstate 10 near multiple local health providers and other businesses. In Irvine, California, ICE is moving into offices located next to a child care agency. In New York, ICE is moving in the offices on Long Island near a passport center. In a wealthy community near Houston, Texas, ICE appears poised to move into an office building blocks away from a preschool. It says DHS claims that the agency now has 22,000 officers and agents stationed around the country and is still in the process of hiring more. The agency received nearly $80 billion in funding as part of Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act, giving it virtually unlimited resources. That does not include the $55 billion through the Navy contract that they have that we've already covered. It says by early November, according to documents viewed by Wired, 19 projects had already been awarded in cities around the U.S. So this was this past November, including Nashville, Tennessee, Dallas, Texas, Sacramento, California, and Tampa, Florida. Multiple projects were days away from being awarded in Miami, Florida, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and New Orleans, Louisiana, among others. An emergency request for short-term space has been made in 8 cities, including Atlanta, Georgia, Baltimore, Maryland, Boston, Massachusetts, and Newark, New Jersey. The September memorandum, citing unusual and compelling urgency for office expansion, states that OPLA will be expanding its legal operations into Birmingham, Alabama, Fort Lauderdale, Fort Myers, Fort Lauderdale, Fort Myers, Jacksonville, and Tampa, Florida, Des Moines, Iowa, Boise, Idaho, Louisville, Kentucky, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Grand Rapids, Michigan, St. Louis, Missouri, Raleigh, North Carolina, Long Island, New York, Columbus, Ohio, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Charleston and Columbia, South Carolina, Nashville, Tennessee, Richmond, Virginia, Spokane, Washington, and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Memorandum also states that the existing offices are at maximum capacity and will require additional space to accommodate the new employees hired. At the time, the memo states that the OPLA had selected almost 1,000 attorneys to hire. Texas has had at least 9 leasing projects underway. The Trump administration official recently told Wired that California and New York are next for the type of fraud investigation that it culminated in 3,000 ICE agents in Minneapolis. So California and New York, strap in. Looks like you're next. At least 7 leasing projects are underway in California. In New York and New Jersey, ICE is expanding its physical footprint rapidly. The same pattern plays out in dozens of other cities across the U.S. ICE's expansion includes not just its own pre-existing space or sharing an office with other government agencies, but also situates its agents near sensitive civilian locations. Again, if you think this has anything to do with immigration, you are dreaming. They are not setting this up for immigrants. There's no possible way that you can manipulate that and maneuver that for that to make any sense whatsoever. They are prepping for the future. They are prepping for the future. And finishing this off for tonight, woman seen trying to set fire to South Kansas City warehouse tied to previous ICE detention proposal. This is interesting. A woman was seen trying to set fire to a South Kansas City warehouse on Thursday, the same site that had been proposed as a possible immigration detention center. KMBC 9 reporter Andy Alcock said he witnessed the woman throw what appeared to be liquid onto the windows before the fire started. Okay. When you first hear that, you think some crazy woman attempting to burn down a detention center before they can start rolling with it. This is the first thing you think of. Problem is none of that makes sense. The problem with that is this detention center, which was the owner of it was attempting or was talking to ICE in order to lease it out to make it a detention center, canceled it. Canceled all talks, canceled the sale. We're not going to do it. After that was announced, this woman in flip-flops, a thing of lighter fluid, and a small matchbook happens to show up at this detention center with KMBC 9 reporter and video camera already set up there in broad daylight, squirts some lighter fluid on windows, and lights it on fire while she's being filmed in broad daylight. Awfully convenient, don't you think? Little convenient. Something tells me that this was possibly going to be a false flag that maybe didn't work. That's all I can say. Because this had all the setup for that. Because this doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. I think they were attempting to false flag something in Kansas City to make it look like there was an uprising against ICE detention facility, and it didn't work out. That's what I'm thinking.